All right, let's stick with Arsenal a second, because Jules, who is clearly very well connected at Arsenal, he had suggested that the goal is for Arsenal to play, for lack of a better word, 4-1-4-1, or essentially a formation where Odegaard and Havertz are kind of alongside each other, and then you've got the wingers and Jesus. Obviously, Gabriel Jesus not there, and so on. And I presume Rice would be the holder, right? There's no Thomas Partey in this Jules fantasy of Arsenal, and it is reminiscent of what we saw from Pep City a couple of years ago, right? I'm gonna just get your take, just conceptually. Does that work with this set of players? Because while they're very good, they also seem a bit different to the ones that Pep had when they did it. And it does put a lot of strain on Declan Rice in that position, potentially.
Yeah.
Especially, and it also means a different role for Zinchenko as well, if he's at left back.
Yeah. I don't... Jules is the Arsenal guy. I'm gonna. I can't.
I mean, obviously they didn't play it in this one because there were players missing, and we saw Thomas Partey, who I thought would be leaving, starting instead, right?
Yeah, I think if they're going to play that, then you're playing Tierney at left back.
More than Zinchenko. Maybe Zinchenko plays midfield.
Exactly, because otherwise, then you would just end up going back to what you had previously, which would be someone like Zinchenko coming into midfield and then having the two pivots anyway. So I don't know if that necessarily works out in my mind. I think seeing Havertz and Odegaard as the attacking midfielders, I do like that. He's very much front foot, but you do need an element of security there as well, because if Ben White, for example, is going to be pushing up alongside of Saka, if the fullback's doing that as well, and before you know it, there's just one holder and two people back there, and that's a dream come true for a team that's trying to soak up some pressure, because then there's just so much space elsewhere to go and do as you please. So I'm not 100% convinced by that, and I don't think Arteta would be. I think it's similar to what happened with Man City yesterday. The idea of the two sixes, whether it comes from two actual sixes or it comes from a defender stepping in to create a second six, I think that's key, because that's shown like there's a good level of security that you can have. Even in attack, you can be defensively solid as well. So I don't necessarily see that unless they're coming up against a team that really doesn't want to attack at all, in which case then I suppose you could just commit more bodies forward. What do you think? I
think it's something that you can look at against certain types of opponents. I also think, essentially Gabriel Jesus plays center forward, but is he really a center forward? Does he occupy certain forward spaces, or does he do a different job? So I was a bit surprised when Joel said he would try that. On the other hand, both Jesus and certainly Havertz, they're unorthodox players, right? They're players who, they've been pigeonholed one way or the other. I mean, Jesus more than Havertz, but they have unusual skill sets, and you can use them in different ways. And I think that's something that really excites Arteta. So I think we'll see it. Sometimes you move towards that situation organically. If you remember early in the game yesterday, Partey was further back. Like Declan Rice was alongside Odegaard and Havertz for long stretches. It was almost like you had a line of five.
Yeah.
Trying to press while City built from deep. So I think we'll see that situation develop organically. I just wonder, the way, and this is a good transition to our next topic about fixture congestion, I don't know how much time managers actually have to go and work on this stuff in preseason. The Champions League final was less than 2 months ago, right? How much time do they actually have? How much time do they then have during the season as well, right? I'm sorry, people will say, "Oh, Gab, you're always saying the same thing." Yeah, because it's always true, right? we pay Pep Guardiola or whoever you want to name, Klopp, or all this money to say, "Coach, teach us, lead us, teach these players," right? And then they don't have any freaking time to do it because preseason is the way it is, because during the season you can't do any work. Yeah. I mean, you've been there. Yeah. When you had a midweek game, how many proper full training sessions do you have? One?
It's not many. It's
one a week, right?
Yeah.
Once you factor in travel and walkthroughs and the day before, right? You have one session where you can actually try something new in training.
Exactly. And more often than not, when you try something new, it's not great the first time you do it. So you need to try it again.
And if you try it again, it's going to be a week later, right?
Yeah, potentially.
I mean...
But I think for Arteta, for Pep and so on, some of the things that they try, it's always from the same foundation. I think most of the work needs to be done around building that foundation. But in terms of, say, relationships and some of the wrinkles and stuff like that could happen, there's no surprise that some of the best football we see from the teams that win the league happens later on in the season anyway, when they're more in a groove with it. And it's not to say that they've worked on it more and more in training, but there's certain games where they're getting a feel for it.
It happens organically over the season.
Yeah, like with City having a player coming from the back to go into midfield. When Rico Lewis was doing it to start with, it was all right. Then it started to drift the other way and it wasn't working. And some people saying it's a terrible formation. By the end of the season, it's the expected formation for them to go on and potentially and win a treble. You know what I mean? People are like, oh, this is great. Everything's fantastic. And that's the organic development, as you've mentioned. But I think Arsenal, they are capable of doing it. And Jesus and Havertz, yes, they are like, you know, they're different. Whichever way you want to pigeonhole them, they are a bit different. But they're also highly intelligent. They're capable. And most of the other pegs will be into the correct holes around them. So I think they will get a feel for it, get an understanding. And I think Arsenal will be really good this year.
Going back to City, Pep said before the game about how situation's getting worse and worse, too many games, so many players injured in preseason, humidity, the players are exhausted, they're exhausted mentally. I mean, he laid it on really thick. I can see where he's coming from. Mm-hmm. He says this all the time. And look, there's an easy argument where you say, hey, you want to play less games, then go to your bosses and say, we'll take less money, right? And play less games, and the games that we do play, we'll play them better. Right? You have the option of doing that, right? It's not realistic. And we're in a situation where actually the guys who play the most games, you know, it's 10, 12 teams.
Yeah.
Most teams do not play that many games in a season. Most teams play between 42 and 44 games, depending how far they get in the clubs, right?
Yeah.
So let's put that...
Yeah.
So you have a situation where this is a problem affecting very few teams, teams that often make the most money and fund the rest of the pyramid.
Yep.
So I don't know how you resolve that one.
Yeah.
But one thing that he can control is adding more players into the mix. And when I look at this and I ask myself, are City going to be better than last season? I mean, Joshua Gvardiol is fantastic. Sure. I think that is a tremendous signing. I'm not 100% on the Kovacic Gundogan.
Yeah, it's not two different players, yeah. It's definitely not like for like.
And again, Pep can work with players, he can improve players. Kovacic has started more than 23 league games in a season just once since 2015.
You see, you don't need to be telling me stuff like that.
I don't know.
I saying stuff like that. That's information I didn't need to hear.
And that's, you know, assuming he can do what last season's version of Gundogan did, which
is not now.
Is a big ask because Gundogan was really good last season.
Yeah.
Once you get past that, you can play John Stones in midfield, as you did with great success last year. But Stones is in midfield, as good he is, he can't also be at the back. And then you get potentially a little bit stretched there. And then can Calvin Phillips be reclaimed when you're around City? Do people say, oh, he was unlucky with injuries, he had that really, was it in the League Cup? He had a terrible game.
Yeah, but everyone did that day.
Is he somebody that do you feel like somebody Pep is counting on?
I don't think so at this moment in time, because otherwise he would have played in that Community Shield game at some level. But he didn't look like he was going to get any time.
All right. Further forward, they've lost a player in Riyad Mahrez, who hasn't been replaced. Now, I would say, well, that's okay. You got Julian Alvarez, you got Phil Foden. Now, when I think that, though, Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden, I say, like, oh, who can replace Kevin De Bruyne when he's out? Oh, it's Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden. Who can replace Erling Haaland when he's out? It's Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden. Who can replace Grealish? The same two guys. So you have two guys back in four positions, and then after that, as I mentioned earlier, then you get into Cole Palmer. Is he somebody who they're looking at and saying, maybe Pep's seen like, he's 21 now, he can make a big step up?
No, I don't think so. Again,
he did score a great goal.
Yeah, as it stands, I don't think so. I think he ended up playing maybe like 23, 24 games last season, but he only started like 3 or 4 of them. I think outside of those starts, the longest he was getting was maybe 15 minutes.
Right.
I don't think he's someone that he entirely trusts. So it does feel like they are short. And I think, as is the case with most teams, the move to Saudi Arabia for some players isn't something that was envisioned 6 months earlier. So it was never part of a plan, but all of a sudden it happens. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to react to it? And I think their feeling is that they are short of a forward. But now the balance is, which forward do you bring in? Are you bringing in someone that is more or less a starter, a real elite starter?
No, you don't. You bring in a body.
Yeah.
You do what you did at the back when you brought in Akanji. Akanji was brought in to be a body.
So who's the body?
What?
Who's the body? Who's the body as a forward for Man City?
Somebody who's already familiar with the system or a similar type
is
system.
that? Who's
going to come in? You're putting me on the spot there, but an equivalent of Leandro Trossard, somebody like that.
Yeah.
Right? That is somebody who, obviously not Leandro Trossard, but I think you can find players like that. And I think right now, as we speak, I have a column up on this where he says this very issue. I think Pep's saying, yeah, let's plan an Akanji move. Maybe it's somebody on loan. Maybe it's a youngster. Maybe it's a veteran who I've worked with before. But there are players out there who fit that bill. And if it is just a body, if it is just a guy who plays in the League Cup so Kevin De Bruyne doesn't get kicked to pieces, that's fine. If he then has an Akanji-type season and elbows his way into the starting lineup and is one of your best defenders, then that's gravy on top.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN+.